Serious, medical professionals of Reddit, have you ever successfully changed an anti-vaxxer's mind? How? I did once. Saw a 8-month-old in the ear with a chronic cough. Spent a while with mom talking about what pertussis actually looks like and why there is a vaccine for it. She agreed to get her child vaccinated at the end of the talk. I listened to a great lecture once where the speaker said that people aren't afraid of the diseases anymore because they don't see them. They see autism, and that's concrete. They can't describe tetanus or pertussis, so they don't fear them. That's why they refuse vaccines. Good food for thought. I had a video of a baby suffering from whooping cough. It is a truly awful thing to see, but I invited mum to watch. She agreed to every single immunization available. I pointed out to a co-worker who was on the fence that the only reason her kid had such a good chance of surviving childhood in the first place was that generations of parents before her assumed the risks associated with far less developed vaccines. I suggested that she owed them all a great debt, and that she should really consider paying it forward. That's a really amazing way to look at it. We humans have to work together generation after generation. I do private duty nursing. I convinced a family to vaccinate their toddler. 1. I understand you're worried because your daughter has a history of a compromised immune system. That is a good and valid worry to have. 2. The pediatrician is saying it's okay to have her vaccinated now. 3. We're having a measles outbreak, which would kill her. 4. Your daughter won't get autism. If she didn't get autism from the thing they wrongly blame her disability on, then she definitely won't get it from something as simple as a vaccine. It took a heavy hitter to give her a bad reaction. This is kids play for her strength and fortitude. Bam. Shots done. Wasn't me in Pashala, but we had a dad bring his 2-year-old son into emergency 3 times in 1 week because he was having trouble breathing. I saw them their first and third visit. After the third visit, dad says, "That's it, I don't care what your mom says, we getting you vaccinated." Poor little guy was only 2 and got whooping. Oof, but I bet he's better now. Some sad encounters I had were parents who had not vaccinated their children when they were babies, but now the parents needed government assistance, and to get childcare or other funding in Australia your children must be vaccinated. And so they decided money was a good enough incentive to give up their anti-vaxxing beliefs. This in itself isn't the saddest part. It was them being responsible for having to vaccinate children with multiple injections at multiple visits at an age where they understood pain enough to create a negative association with doctors and nurses and vaccinations. I do see Australia's vaccine requirement for families with kids seeking government assistance as a good thing. You'd be surprised by how fast someone will give up a genuine belief when there's money at stake. I had my son at 17 years old. He ended up having autism. My doctor told me it could be from his first set of immunizations. I was young and believed her since she was a doctor. I'm embarrassed to say I was an anti-vaxxer till I decided to do my own research and couldn't find a reliable article of evidence to prove that immunizations caused autism in my son. I believe it was genetics, as autism runs in my family. I'm actually peeved that a doctor made such an impression on me that I look like a fool for 15 years. I'm 33 now and I'm not an anti-vaxxer any longer. The fact that your doctor told you that is mind-boggling. She should have her license removed. Farmed here. I do a lot of health education with my patients. There's some great info here and my post likely won't be seen, but I'm happy to add if it helps anyone. Here are my tenets for the vaccine discussion. Be respectful and patient. Empathize with their concerns. 99% of them aren't malicious. They are just trying to do what's right for their kids. Acknowledge the fact that nothing in medicine is ever 100% harmless. My line is anything that has an effect will have a side effect in someone at some point. Provide examples of vaccine safety and disease harm, both from studies and your own experiences. The latter is not as objective, but some people connect very well to it. Understand that it will likely take time to get them to come around if they do. Many have no interest in changing their mind. I also encourage my colleagues to read up on why people believe in pseudoscience and how these beliefs often tie into people's own identities and how they view themselves. It's a big reason why these conversations are so difficult. This post ended up being a lot longer than I anticipated. The useful info is above. Feel free to ignore the bottom portion. Just some ramblings of a pharmacist who gets really worked up by this sort of thing. The whole process can be time consuming, and time is a rare resource in healthcare these days. But if you can do it, it's very worth it. Many healthcare providers are discouraged because the tide of fake news in medicine seems unstoppable, especially with quack professions getting recognition by governments and exacerbating people's paranoia. My best success story was a woman who at first didn't even want her child admitted to the hospital, had some serious fears that he'd be harmed and wanted him to be managed by his naturopath instead. Every time we wanted to add or change therapy, myself or the MD, sometimes both of us, would have to talk to her and review what we're doing and what our plan was and whether we had a backup plan for X, Y, or Z. The child unfortunately had to stay in the hospital for a few weeks, but during those weeks, and through education by almost everyone on our team, we started hitting multiple milestones with her coming to accept the food intolerance tests the naturopath had ordered were meaningless. Homeopathic preparations are at most no more effective than placebos, and at worst dangerous decontamination. Antibiotics will not negatively suppress his immune system. Vaccines are effective. Vaccines do not cause autism. I was thrilled when we hit this one. I took care of a patient who is super conspiracy theory. I asked him why we would bother putting microchips in the flu vaccines when we already know what he's doing based off his Facebook, Instagram, and other various social networking accounts for his conspiracy theories. I was able to tell him what he had for lunch within 30 seconds on my work computer by googling for his conspiracy theory account. Well, crap. I guess that does make sense. Go ahead and start me up fresh. God, this is great. He's terrified of being spied on, yet literally gives away all his details anyways. I'm glad you were able to bring him around, and I hope it gave him reason to reconsider his social media habits. I have never seen a true anti-vaxxer in the sense it is used today, anti-MMR, DAP, etc. But I have seen many people who did not understand how the yearly flu vaccine worked. Most of them were people who had gotten the vaccine in the past and still got the flu, thinking the vaccine gave them the flu. I took the time to educate them about the vaccine and the 0% chance of getting the flu from the vaccine. Once they understood they could possibly get the flu even if vaccinated, but that the chances were much lower, most would get the vaccine. Not to mention that norovirus, stomach flu, circulates at the same time and is very often mistaken for influenza. No, you didn't get the flu shot then got the flu. You got a totally different virus. I have changed many on the fence vaxxers' minds. Anti-vaxxers are a whole other breed. On the fences can be swayed with reputable sources and studies. I once had an anti-vaxxer completely go off on me simply for asking if her tetanus shot was up to date. She started accusing me of conspiring with Big Pharma to push deadly toxins on her just so I could make a profit. I calmly looked at her and asked if she thought I was such an evil person. Why would she assume I would stop at vaccines? I mean, it would be just as easy to push toxins through pills or any number of other medical treatments. For a moment, you could see the hamster wheel turning in her head. Then after a brief tantrum filled with quite foul language, she promptly walked out. When asking about changing an anti-vaxxer's mind, this might not be the direction you were hoping for. I was able to once. This woman was anti-vax because her daughter had gotten reactions from the vaccines on more than one occasion and that led her to believe that all vaccines were bad. As it turns out, the girl had a rare condition that caused her to react badly to vaccines. I was able to explain to the mother that rather than trying to remove vaccines, she should be advocating for them as her daughter falls under the group that requires herd immunity. I told her that her daughter would be exempt from vaccines due to medical necessity and that she would now depend on the protection of the vaccinated. The mom was able to understand my points and is now on the pro-vax side. When I was a medical student, I met a pediatrician who was missing most of her fingers and toes. She had gotten the flu when she was younger, and had gotten so septic that her body shut down blood flow to her extremities, and her fingers and toes died and had to be surgically removed. She said that after sharing that story, most of her anti-vaxxers changed their mind. medical student in the United States here. It all depends on where they fall on the anti-vaccination spectrum. If a patient or parent is misinformed but willing to discuss, it's not too difficult to have an open dialogue and try to ease their concerns about vaccination. If they're a little more firm in their position, it's much more difficult to provide recommendations. Ultimately, it comes down to respecting the patient and earning their trust rather than spewing facts at them. I've had the most success when I provide personal anecdotes. For instance, my father required a bone marrow transplant a number of years ago and was unable to receive any vaccines afterwards due to his weakened immune system. If he came into contact with an unvaccinated individual that carried a disease that we prevent with vaccines, he could have contracted the disease. I was able to connect with an anti-vax parent in a similar situation and convince her to get her kids vaccinated. It's rare to have success, but it does happen, especially when you have the time to foster a relationship built on mutual respect. Similar to others, started by acknowledging that they were concerned given all the misinformation, but careful to not suggest there is any merit in the current anti-vax argument. Led with the history irony of Wakefield, i.e. how he forged data and was paid, the exact behavior that anti-vaxxers hate and use to support their conspiracy about the big pharma medicine machine. Shared facts about vaccine safety. Show them the Autism Speaks statement that clearly states there are no valid data to suggest an association between autism and immunizations. Shared stories of actual patients who suffered major consequences from acquiring a vaccine-preventable illness. It took a lot of time. I'm a subspecialist though, and it was especially important for the child to be immunized given their other diseases. But bottom line is that it's especially important for everyone to be immunized who doesn't have a medical contraindication. Yes, but unfortunately it wasn't until I was involved in her infant's care while he was suffering from pertussis contracted from her older children. Her baby was coughing so hard he wasn't able to breathe and had to be placed on supplemental oxygen, and she asked me if it was her fault. We had a talk and I feel like I changed her mind. Who knows if it stuck though? Yes, the mother of a 13-month-old who was hospitalized last night in fact. The funny thing is the kid was up to date on all immunizations through 6 months. Then mom's friends convinced her that shots were dangerous and she stopped allowing his pediatrician's office to give them after that. I think seeing her son in a hospital bed must have given way to a moment of clarity, because after we just gently explained that without vaccines her child could very well end up in the hospital again, she pulled a 180 and agreed to get him on the catch-up schedule prior to discharge. No lectures or guilting necessary. Sometimes people can make irrational decisions based on fear. I think most anti-vaxxers genuinely believe they are acting in their children's best interest, even if that puts them at odds with the overwhelming majority of the medical community. But in this case, coming face to face with a different sort of fear actually set things right. Okay, can someone explain the vaccine shedding thing to me? Like recently vaccinated people aren't allowed around cancer patients etc. Is that true? Someone on my FB is an anti-vax person and the only thing I can't dispute that they've shared is the shedding thing because I don't understand it. Is shedding an actual thing? Keep in mind, even intelligent people are susceptible to common misconceptions. I have an incredibly intelligent family, and even still, some of them think getting a vaccine equals getting sick for a short time. I've had to explain how flu vaccines contain a deactivated flu virus and remind them that the reason a lot of people get flu symptoms around the time of a flu vaccine is because when do people get flu vaccines the most? Flu season. As someone who has been diagnosed with high-functioning autism, it really doesn't affect me in my day-to-day life, so it makes me sad that people would rather have a dead child than an autistic one. But then again, people who think lol should probably not be parents. Yes, same, but it makes me pee not sad. I'm not sure I completely count it as changing someone's mind, but I have a patient that is about 12 who got her first vaccine last year. Every year we talk about risks and benefits of vaccines and which ones make the most sense to do next. I think some other providers might have, understandably, approached this family with frustration or anger for waiting until age 11 for the first vaccine, but instead I've partnered with them and worked with them. And she just finished her MMR series and is about to get her next tetanus booster. Baby steps are worth it in the end run. I've thanked parents with entrusting their children in my care, and then told them that vaccines are absolutely the most important thing that I do as a pediatrician. So if they trust me, they gotta know this. Nurse here. Short answer, no. The sickest kid I've ever taken care of was only 18 months old when he became ill very quickly. But we did an emergency intubation while we tried to figure out what was going on. Turns out the kid wasn't vaccinated. We were trying to figure out if he'd been exposed to anything recently that would have made him susceptible. Mum's walls went up as soon as we asked if he was up to date on vaccinations. And we're not vaccinating. So don't waste your breath. This is her child laid there, too weak to breathe on his own. I threw up my hands and walked away. There's no talking sense into people. Not really. I've nearly gotten through to one of my friends, but after consulting with her Facebook group she doubled down on her beliefs. It's a shame too, because I did everything right. Cause everything on Facebook is true-s. You really can't fix stupid. But, years ago, my mother was going to intentionally expose my brother to chickenpox to get it over with, but our awesome pediatrician stopped her with this. You know the most kids I have to hospitalize in my practice? For complications from chickenpox. They get staph from the open sores then quickly turn septic. Stopped mom in her tracks. And this was in the 70s. We also have a cousin that contracted polio in the late 50s, early 60s. Did we vaccinate? The vaccine for chickenpox didn't exist in the 70s. It's barely been a decade since it was available, if I recall correctly, and I think the logic for exposing kids to it was that it was marginally safer than risking them catching it when they were older. I'm not sure you can say I changed it. Her kiddo got the flu, and it was really bad. Hospital bad. She got the rest of the family vaccinated after that. Didn't go for all the shots, but we did negotiate her into the flu, MMR and varicella. I want to say Hib and Hep and B as well. I'm an office administrator in a clinic that bills itself as vaccine friendly. We take patients who are all across the spectrum, from those who want the CDC schedule to parents who are militant anti-vaxxers. I really had to do a lot of soul searching before taking my job, because I love science and facts, and it's pretty well known that hardcore anti-vaxxers are pretty nutty. However, the providers that I work with really changed my mind. They all firmly believe in vaccines and the CDC schedule, but what they realized is that a large majority of people are really on the fence. They get confused and overwhelmed at all the misinformation that's out there, and being told that you're just not smart enough to understand the study. I'm a doctor, so you'll do what I say or get out isn't always a successful way to win people over. These parents are just trying to do what's best for their kids. They want someone who is willing to listen to them and address their fears without making them feel small and stupid. I can also see the value of taking children who aren't vaccinated when you see all these notices posted by doctors' offices stating that they will refuse care to those who aren't properly immunized. You are not going to win over those patients, and in case of an illness, the parents will either refuse to seek any treatment or will go to someone who has no business treating them, like a chiropractor or homeopath. Everyone who brings their children into the office understands the risks they assume. If you want an office that's strict about vaccines, that's awesome. But children shouldn't be denied care because their parents make dumb decisions. I've found polio supporters to be about even with flat earthers when it comes to looking at opposing evidence with an open mind. In other words, fingers in ears, humming loudly and occasionally punching themselves in the nuts hoping to black out from pain so they won't have to hear it. I met one of them IRL. I was just finishing my degree in public health and we struck up a conversation. It was a mother and daughter. Her daughter was very bright, but had bought the anti-vax crap hook, line, and sinker. She wasn't vaccinated. The mother said she knew someone who had had a vaccine injury. Most anti-vaxxers have moved the goalposts and don't think they cause autism anymore. I talked with her for probably an hour or two about the safety of vaccines, why they're important, childhood diseases, and how it's not just for you, but to protect the people around you. I told them about my experience of getting the flu even after being vaccinated and why that happened. Basically, I was vaccinated against the current strain of American flu going around, so I wasn't protected from the English strain of flu. They actually listened and seemed interested in what I had to say. I like to hope that I at least pushed them in the direction of talking to their doctor. They seemed at least somewhat convinced. I don't know if they ever got a come to Jesus moment, but I sure hope so. It seemed like they were most convinced by the idea of herd immunity, that because some people can't be vaccinated for medical reasons, you getting vaccinated protects them. Yes, all the time by treating them kindly, going over risks and benefits while at the same time wanting to scream, ah, and addressing their concerns, which is the hardest part. More success with the flu shot than anything else, but I've been successful with others. Nope. In their minds I am part of an evil system paid to keep them sick. Stupid people are stupid, and you can't science someone out of ignorance they didn't use science to get themselves into. My daughter was supposed to get the mumps vaccine on a Wednesday of 1 week. I had work, so I rescheduled for Friday of the same week. Wednesday I come home and see her with symptoms of mumps. I'm just a nurse, so I can't diagnose, but it was almost definitely mumps. My wife has several friends who doubt vaccines, but after what happened to my daughter, none of us took any chances with vaccines. Heck, I would even give her the flu shot myself if it was legal. Well, I'm not a medic. Currently studying aerospace engineering in Italy. Sorry for my English, but I successfully changed the mind of an anti-vaxxer. His main thesis was, if we don't have huge problems with, for example, hepatitis, why have I to vax my kid? I'm started from introducing the survivorship bias. I didn't really studied it, but I know the sense of it. Basically, during the World War I there was an engineer that was engaged to enhance those wooden aircrafts. They were looking at bullet holes on aircrafts returning from battles. He decided to enhance areas with holes with better materials. The problem was that if an aircraft can return from a battle even with those areas ruined, they don't really need to be enhanced because they are not vital. They had to enhance the areas that on returned aircraft was intact. They returned because those areas wasn't hit by bullets. This example of influence is pretty common in statistics. Sometimes we're going to consider only one part of data, making huge decisions while we're not considering others at all. So if we didn't have hepatitis epidemics in last years, it's not because nowadays it doesn't exist, but because humanity learned enough about it and know how to prevent hundreds of thousands of victims. And the cost of prevention is to vax your kid, even if the statistics is talking about 1 dead in a million. You're not going to consider that maybe this 1 dead was the only one without the vaccine, giving you the probability of 100% of mortality if not vaccinated. BTW, our discussion was long, about 2 hours. Can't write a book on Reddit. Generally you don't change the anti-vaxxer's mind. Their child does when they come in on life support because they didn't want chemicals harming their child in the form of the pertussis vaccine. Then they realized too late that the diseases are far worse than they realized, and the amount of chemicals going into their system just to keep them alive, and everything is awful. Though some still don't change their mind, like the kid who recently had tetanus in Oregon, which doesn't cause you to develop immunity. The parents stood by their choice. I guess technically this counts. I'm a pharmacist, and I will post anti-vax stuff to my Facebook feed occasionally. After a while of this, I was talking to a friend and she said that she used to be anti-vax, but my posts and those of other friends on the same subject had changed her mind. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.